Ukraine just launched a massive 98 missile strike on Russian-occupied Crimea. At first, it looked like Russia's most fortified stronghold in the Black Sea would hold. But what happened in the next hour shocked everyone watching and changed the balance of the war. At 3:19 p.m., under the clear afternoon skies over Crimea, Ukrainian forces fired a staggering 98 missiles in a coordinated strike. Storm Shadow cruise missiles, Neptune anti-ship weapons, and long-range rockets surged across the water and low over the land, lighting up Russian radars across the peninsula. For the defenders, this was no drill. Alarms echoed across Sevastopol, Saki, and Vardiska. Operators inside hardened bunkers watched their screens fill with dozens of inbound tracks, each closing fast. They had only minutes to react before impact. The attack wasn't random. Intelligence later revealed Ukraine had been preparing this strike for weeks, mapping Russian positions with drones, satellites, and informants on the ground. Every launch site, every radar dish, every depot had been logged with precision. Russian commanders believed their layered defenses, S-400 batteries, S-300 systems, and electronic warfare hubs, would stop anything thrown at them. But what came next proved them wrong. Inside Russian command posts, chaos broke out as officers shouted firing orders to missile crews. S-400 launchers roared, sending interceptors streaking into the sky. Dozens of missiles arced upward, leaving white contrails across the horizon. But the sheer number of incoming Ukrainian strikes was overwhelming. The first impacts came within minutes. Explosions ripped through fuel depots, fireballs rose above airfields, and shockwaves rolled across Crimea's coastline. The peninsula that Moscow had promised to defend at any cost was suddenly under its heaviest assault since the start of the war. And this was only the beginning. At 3:27 p.m., as the smoke from the first wave rose over Crimea, Russian commanders scrambled to understand what was happening. For years, Moscow had called Crimea its fortress, packed with air defense systems, radar stations, and naval facilities. Every hill bristled with missiles. Every airfield was guarded by layers of defenses. On paper, no strike should have broken through. But Ukraine had built this operation to dismantle those defenses step by step. The first confirmed hit was devastating. A Storm Shadow missile struck the 96 L6AP radar tied to an S-400 battery near Yevpatoria. That single radar guided one of Russia's most advanced $200 million air defense systems. Without it, the launchers were blind. Operators tried to fire anyway, but their screens showed nothing but static. What was once Russia's pride, the S-400 Triumph, was reduced to useless steel in minutes. Then came the second blow. Missiles slammed into a GLONASS ground control station. This site controlled Russia's satellite navigation system, the backbone for guiding missiles and precision strikes. Fire engulfed the facility. Antennas collapsed. Screens went dark. In an instant, Russia's ability to guide its own weapons was crippled. Analysts later said it was one of the most important blows of the war, because without GLONASS, Russian missiles lost accuracy across the entire front. But Ukraine wasn't finished. Vardiska Air Base, a critical hub, came under fire next. Drones marked targets as missiles slammed into the tarmac. Two Mi-8 helicopters worth more than $60 million erupted in flames. Footage showed black smoke billowing into the sky, wreckage burning on the runway. Russia's airlift capacity in Crimea was cut in half in one strike. Minutes later, explosions tore through Sevastopol harbor. A Ukrainian missile struck and destroyed the Buk-2190 tugboat, part of the Black Sea Fleet. On the surface, it was only a support ship. In reality, it carried out sabotage and logistics missions. Its destruction limited Russia's naval flexibility and crippled operations across the Black Sea. Every minute brought another strike. Near Saki airfield, Ukrainian missiles repeated the tactic against an S-300 system. Its radar was destroyed, blinding yet another layer of defenses. Suddenly, Crimea's skies, once believed to be impenetrable, were full of holes. Russian operators shouted into radios, but their calls went unanswered. Entire systems had gone dark. This was no random barrage. It was a systematic dismantling of Russia's strongest base. And it was working. At 3:41 p.m., by the half-hour mark, the attack had turned Crimea into a battlefield. Russia's air defenses were firing wildly, but most of their missiles exploded into empty air. Ukrainian salvos kept coming, each one aimed at a specific weakness. Command bunkers reported failures across the peninsula, and officers struggled to decide where to focus. The truth was, they were already too late. At Saki airfield, flames spread from destroyed radars to ammunition depots. A series of secondary explosions ripped through the site, sending fireballs into the sky that could be seen for miles. Drone footage later showed charred remains of launchers and craters littering the runways. Russian crews abandoned positions, leaving vehicles behind as fires raged uncontrolled. Then another shock. The RT-70 radio telescope, a massive Soviet-era installation used for satellite tracking, was hit directly. Once a proud symbol of space monitoring, it collapsed in flames. Analysts confirmed it had supported GLONASS operations, meaning the strike not only crippled navigation, but also damaged Russia's long-term ability to monitor satellites. Military experts called its destruction irreplaceable. At Sevastopol, the Black Sea Fleet braced for more. Ukrainian missiles streaked low across the water. Explosions rocked the docks. Storage tanks burst into flames, fuel pouring across the harbor. Panic spread as naval crews scrambled to move ships away from the fire. Some vessels fled deeper into port. Others tried to leave entirely, fearing more strikes were on the way. Russian state channels insisted everything was under control, but the evidence was clear. Live feeds showed black smoke rising over multiple cities. Social media filled with videos of explosions lighting up the afternoon sky. Sirens wailed across towns as residents rushed for cover. The strikes weren't limited to one target. They hit across the entire peninsula. Each impact stripped away another piece of Russia's fortress. S-400 gone. GLONASS crippled. Helicopters destroyed. Naval assets in flames. Even hardened bunkers shook as Ukraine pounded command posts with precision strikes. What Moscow had built for a decade was being dismantled in less than an hour. For Russian commanders, the realization was brutal. This wasn't harassment. It was a message. Crimea, the crown jewel of Russia's Black Sea power, was no longer safe. At 4:10 p.m., by late afternoon, the strike had ended, but the damage was everywhere. Out of 98 missiles launched, more than half tore through defenses and struck their targets. Russia claimed it intercepted the majority, but satellite images and video evidence told the opposite story. Flames still burned at airfields, fuel depots were gutted, and naval facilities stood crippled. The so-called Fortress of Crimea was left exposed. Russian troops scrambled across smoking ruins, dragging hoses to fight fires while others carried wounded from shattered buildings. Craters dotted highways near air bases, and burnt wrecks of helicopters lay scattered along runways. The Black Sea Fleet's support tug lay half-sunk at its dock, smoke rising from twisted steel. What was once Moscow's most secure outpost had become a graveyard of its own equipment. Ukraine wasted no time capitalizing. Officials announced the strike as proof that Russia's strongest defenses could be broken in hours. Messages spread across social media showing drones circling over burning bases with captions declaring, "Crimea will fall." Civilians in nearby towns filmed the black plume stretching high into the sky. Across Ukraine, morale surged. Across Russia, shock spread in silence. Internationally, the message was clear. Moscow had spent billions fortifying Crimea with S-400s, S-300s, advanced radars, and naval assets. In less than a day, Ukraine stripped away those layers one by one. Western analysts called it a turning point, saying Russia's air defense credibility had been shattered. Even allies who believed Crimea was untouchable now saw the reality. It was vulnerable. By nightfall, the situation was undeniable. Russia had lost critical systems, vital aircraft, and the confidence that Crimea was safe. Ukraine had delivered one of its boldest and most devastating strikes of the war. For Moscow, it was humiliation. For Kyiv, it was proof. Crimea could be hit, and it would be hit again. And that was the real message behind the smoke. This wasn't just destruction, it was a warning. The days of calling Crimea untouchable were over. This was only the beginning. If it were you, what do you think truly caused Russia's collapse in this strike? Was it the sheer force of 98 missiles, or the weak defenses that couldn't hold the line? Share your thoughts in the comments below. Every idea helps us piece together the turning points of this war. If you found this video valuable, hit like and subscribe so you won't miss our next frontline breakdown. This is Navy Point, where every battle tells a story. See you on the next mission.